Today, I'm with the first pick. It's our final pre-draft rankings for the edge rushers and linebackers. And like the D-line group we talked about the other day, this edge class is insanely deep, and you will be able to find dudes well into day 3. I'm Ryan Wilson. That's former Titans GM, Florida Gator, Key West own, Ran Carthon. This is episode 242. And Ran, before I allow you to gloat, because your national champions are, in fact, national champions, we have 14 days, 2 weeks, until the 2025 NFL draft. And look, you played at Florida. You were there. You graduated 2003 or 2004?
2003.
2003. So I'm going to see what color does your blood run if you're a Florida Gator? Orange or blue?
Both.
We'll see how blue and orange your blood is, because back in the day when I used to actually watch college basketball, I'll give you an easy one first. Who was the coach of the 2007 national champion Florida Gators?
Billy D.
Billy D. And how many players can you name from that roster? I mean, you were out of the league then, but certainly you followed the Gators closely.
So let's see. Torian Green.
Got him.
Corey Brewer. Horford. Joakim Noah.
Okay.
We good?
That's good. All right. Because I remember Noah was on that team. Here's how old I am. I remember Noah's dad playing tennis in the majors back in the 80s.
His dad was Yannick, right?
Yannick from France. And before Europe started sending their basketball players over here, and Noah, he was probably 6'10", wasn't he? He was a big kid.
Yeah, 6'10", 6'11".
Played in the league for a while as well. Had a good run there. And that's sort of when the SEC started taking basketball seriously, because I grew up, you can see it right there. That's my 1982 UNC National Championship poster with Michael Jordan and Sam Perkins and James Worthy, Dean Smith. Shout out to the GOAT. Things started to change back then in the right around the time that you were in college, and the SEC started taking basketball seriously. So congratulations to you, sir. Got your Gators gear on. Now you need to fix that football team. DJ Lagway's fun, man. He's going to be good.
Oh, yeah. No doubt about it. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, let's get to this. I'm glad we allowed you to gloat. I want to ask you this, because you're the general manager here. 15 days to go, 14 days to go, 2 weeks into the draft. What's going on in draft meetings? How close are we to having that final board set now that pro days are over? Is it set? And what are you doing the next 2 weeks? I would imagine 30 visits are going to be in there somewhere as well, right?
Yeah, 30 visits. You may even have a later local day, depending on the talent level that you have. But your board is pretty set. Now you're just doing little projects, calling pods, of different scenarios, and you're working through that with your scouts and with your coaches, and you're finalizing, getting more information that you can, and you're paying attention to other 30 visits, and you finalizing who's going where and what you can with the private workouts. And then from there, you're shutting it off, because it becomes misinformation season, and then everybody is putting out there what they want to put out there.
And that's going to be our job the next 2 weeks, to try to sift through the what's true and what isn't true, and try not to be part of the problem, because it can certainly get to a point where you're not getting smarter listening to what people are saying at this point, because no one's telling you the truth
at all.
By the way, if you're listening to us or watching us on YouTube, you can scroll back into the podcast feed. Rand and I were at the Colorado Showcase last Friday, and then the week before that, we were the Cam Ward Pro Day. So you can listen to those podcasts if you haven't already. And this is the last position group we're doing, the edge rushers and linebackers, but you can go back and listen to me and Danny Cannell talk quarterbacks, me and Bryant McFadden talk cornerbacks and safeties, and Lee Douzable, our guy, talk defensive line earlier this week. So check that stuff out as well. All right, Rand, you ready to get into this thing?
Let's do it. Let's knock it out.
Let's knock it out. We're going to start with the edge rushers first. And producer Stryker, if you don't mind, can you call up our individual rankings before we get to the consensus with the first pick big board at the edge rush group? And this is pretty similar. At the top, Abdul Carter. And this feels like a situation, Ran, and we'll talk in specifics about these guys, but just a general overview of what our individual rankings are. Abdul Carter feels like a guy that across the board, everyone agrees it's probably going to be edge rush 1.
Yeah, no doubt about it, and he should be. I was even buzzing through some tape this morning, just watching him, and you hear the Von Miller comparisons, and rightfully so. Like, this kid is freaky in everything that he does, and to think about it, he's only been playing the edge position 1 year. And so imagine all the versatility you can have with him and the different packages a defensive coordinator could put together to get him on the field in varying spots to take advantage of his athleticism and his movement skills.
I have Mike Green, number 2 on my list. He's number 3 on your list, UVA transfer who played at Marshall. James Pearce Jr. out of Tennessee is your number 2. He's my number 3. And we'll talk in detail about both those young men and both on the field and maybe some off the field concerns that teams may have and where they end up getting drafted as a result. Jalon Walker was number 4 on both our lists. He's quote unquote undersized for an edge rusher. He's only 6'1", but he also played off ball, sort of like Abdul Carter, and you can line him up anywhere. And I think he's an interesting chess piece if you're a defensive coordinator looking to get crazy with an athlete that you can put anywhere on the field. I had Shemar Stewart 5 out of Texas A&M, and Ran had Donovan Ezeiruaku out of BC. If those two guys stood next to each other, you would know they played the same position. One's 248 and one's 285, 290. But they're going to both be vying to go in the first round, and we'll talk about those young men as well. But let's get to the consensus list, Rand. And number 1, no surprise, based on our individual rankings, it's Abdul Carter. And I don't want to overstate it because sometimes we start getting into hyperbole as we get through the draft process. But it's hard not to love Abdul Carter for the reasons you talked about. The physical stuff, absolutely. We talked to him at the combine, and he has an edge to him, and that's sort of what you want when you're talking about a pass rusher. Only played edge rush one season because he's an off-ball guy. I don't want to say it, but I'll say it. He wore number 11. He made the move from off-ball to edge. Is he in the same conversation physically, the way he plays, the twitchiness, anything similar to Micah Parsons?
I mean, it's a good comparison. Going back, if I'm remembering correctly, watching Micah Parsons, I felt the same way when I watched Abdul Carter's off the ball tape. Little slow instinctually to key and diagnose quickly, but their short area burst and close made up for that. And then you saw flashes of Micah playing on the edge. And I remember writing in my report that the best thing he probably does is rush off the edge, and never put it any more than that in my report. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I forecasted his future and said that he was going to be one of the best edge guys in the league. But to make the same move, the one thing I'll say about the number 11 comparisons is this. He fits the mold of all the other great number 11s that have come through that program.
Yeah. LeVar Arrington was the number 11, I believe, right? Wasn't LeVar number 11?
Yep, LeVar was 11.
Yeah, absolutely. Western PA's own LeVar Arrington, top 5 pick for sure for Washington back in the day. Hey, producer Stryker, Penn State alum. Who's your favorite player out between Micah and Abdul?
I would go with Micah for now, but I think Abdul has the upside to be right there. And now, just fun fact, LeVar Arrington Jr. is at Penn State, the new number 11. Freshman.
Oh, he's the new number 11.
Yeah, already got it as a freshman, so big shoes to fill.
Big shoes to fill. You know what's funny, Rand? We work with a lot of Penn State guys. You think that team will be better? All the dudes you got coming through there. Had to get that in there. Okay, so Titans are taking Cam at 1. After that, it feels like Abdul could go 2, and if he gets past 5, something's gone horribly wrong, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you could see a fit for him in anywhere, in the top 5. If Cleveland decides to go quarterback, or Travis Hunter or whomever, imagine if you're the Giants sitting there and you have Abdul Carter, and just, again, going back, thinking about the packages that defensive coordinator Shane Bowen can run. You got the 2 edge guys, you got Brian Burns, you got Kayvon Thibodeau, and then now you could put a NASCAR package together where you got Abdul Carter standing up, moving around, rushing over a guard. Like, that'll give offensive coordinators nightmares. You got to get the ball out quick. And so I'm pretty sure they would love nothing more than to have that scenario. But you can make an argument for him going anywhere within picks 2 to 5.
So you actually have talked about this before, but let's recap it again for folks who maybe didn't hear it the first time. At 4, the New England Patriots, if by some crazy stretch of the imagination, Abdul Carter is there at 4. And I had a 3-round mock draft come out on Monday, and I actually had the Patriots with the possibility of taking Abdul Carter there. I had them trading down to 10. I had the Bears trading up to 10, and the Patriots are still able to get Will Campbell to start at offensive tackle. Does it make sense, for the reasons you laid out, for the Patriots to take Abdul Carter at 4, even though they still have not addressed the tackle position, or would you consider taking some phone calls?
I mean, you got to listen to the phone calls because it could be a package that you can't turn down that'll get you more picks in the top 100. I know those guys do value top 100 picks and getting as many as possible. But like you said, if he's there, I think it'll be hard, for Mike Vrabel and Terrell Williams to pass up on him because you still do have Vidarian Lowe, who can be your left tackle for this year, and you could look to address it either next year in free agency or, in the draft. Because if I'm not mistaken, I believe the Patriots were in on left tackle Dan Moore in free agency, so they did show a willingness to sign a guy there. But I'm sure that you can, get by in Josh's offense with Vidarian Lowe at left tackle and look address that position next year.
And they pick in the early 30s as well. So there could be someone, a tackle that you could consider there. Maybe a Ronte Ursery or out of Minnesota, for example, if that's the direction you want to go.
Or Josh Connerly Jr.
Josh Connerly Jr., insane athlete. All right. So Abdul Carter is not getting out of the top 5 unless both his legs fall off, is what I'm hearing.
Pretty much.
He still might go top 5.
I'll say this. When we were in Atlanta, because I'm thinking about the Jones fracture that he's dealing with. When I was in Atlanta, we traded up to the 6th pick and took one Quintorius Julio Jones at the 6th pick, who was coming off of the same injury after the combine, and he had a lights out rookie year. So he will definitely go in the top 5. Abdul Carter will. And
I'm not a doctor, but Jones is different in terms of severity than Lisfranc, correct?
Yes. Jones is the 5th metatarsal, if I'm not mistaken, and the Achilles is obviously the ligament that basically keeps your foot and ankle and everything together. And so that's considerably more devastating. The Jones fracture can be fixed with a screw. And just as long as that heals properly, you could be back in no time.
Gotcha. And by the way, at my age, everything you do is done with the understanding that your Achilles could pop at any moment. And I'm not talking about fast movements. I'm talking about getting out of a chair. So I'm in a similar situation as Abdul Carter in that sense. And that's where the similarity is in. All right, next up. These guys are tied. We'll start with Mike Green, edge rusher out of Marshall, transferred from UVA. I don't know if I've told you my fun fact. I've said it a few times on the podcast, but I'll see if I did. Do you know where Mike Green is from, where he grew up?
Somewhere in North Carolina near where you grew up.
You close. Yeah, I'm all right. I'm that predictable after 2 weeks together. He's from Williamsburg, Virginia, where I went to college. Do you know what all-time great pass rusher is from Williamsburg, Virginia?
Let's go Bruce Smith.
Oh,
or LT.
LT is from Williamsburg, Virginia, Lafayette High School. He went to the same high school as LT. And he said when we spoke with him at the Senior Bowl that he hopes to get his picture next to LT's. And there's like a little small 8x8 picture of LT in the hallway. He hopes to get his picture next to him. So UVA transferred. He addressed some off-field concerns that he had at the combine. He brought it up himself. They weren't sort of sprung on him. So he's addressed those things. I know some teams are not concerned about the off-field issues in terms of where he may get drafted. We'll see. There's a reason he's number 2 and number 3 on our individual list here. I didn't think anyone played with as much fire, hair on fire type snap to snap as we saw from Mike Green. 50 snaps a game. He felt like he was going 100% every single time. He's 251-ish. 6'3" to 251-ish, I think is what he came in at. He reminded me a little bit, and you can laugh at my comments like our buddy Rick used to, a little bit in terms of his hair on fire approach to playing edge as like Will Anderson Jr., just in terms of the no quit in his game. Similar size, too. But I think he's a top 15 guy on the field. We'll see what happens. What do you like about Mike Green?
I think, and I'm not sounding crazy, I hope not, but I think he probably is the most natural and most instinctive pass rusher in this class. I think he just has a natural knack for rushing the passer despite his size. He was fun tape to watch early in the process, during the fall. But he's probably the most instinctual and natural pass rusher of this group.
All right. That makes you feel better about what I said. So that's good. Next up, this young man actually is from North Carolina, James Pearce Jr. He's from Charlotte. And I do know some teams have him off the board for off-field stuff. I don't know what the specifics of those off-field things are. And I will probably not learn because they don't concern me. But I know he's also had some 30 visits. So let me ask you this. If there's a guy with off-field issues that have been identified through the pre-draft process and you bring him in for a 30 visit, what does that say? Does that say you might consider drafting him? You're not worried about it, or maybe it's a guy that if he starts to fall, you might start to focus in on him.
I think it's both. I think if you're looking at him and you really like, it's hard to watch his tape and not like the talent. Like let's just say that. And the reason why I have him as my number 2 is because I think this guy is just naturally gifted. And I went into it trying not to think about the off-field concerns, right? Because in our spot, we don't have to worry about that anymore. Right. Let's just judge the talent and what we think he can be. And, before Abdul Carter emerged as the top guy, there were some arguments that this guy was the top pass rusher coming into this class. And so that's why I have him at number 2, because I still think he can grow into his body and fill out a little bit more. But to answer your question, I think that when you bring him in on a 30 visit, you're trying to see, if those things in the character, and I have a little bit of knowledge of what they are, you're trying to see if they hold true. And you're trying to, make that one final decision. Can this guy fit in our program, in our city, in our state, and be a model citizen? And if not, then you can just from there take him off the board. I wanted to, I know teams are meeting. I wanted to talk to some people I know out there just to kind of see if this guy is officially off your board, or is there a level in which you're comfortable taking? Because to me, those are 2 different things.
Because that is. So you could say that he's off your board, but if he's there in the 5th round, he's the top 10 talent, you might have a different conversation. Not that you'll have that conversation in the moment, you'll talk about it ahead of time, but there are layers to being off the board, I guess, right?
Yes, it's layers. It's being completely off the board, it's being tilted on the board, or it's being upside down on the board. Those are all 3 different things. Or gotcha. Is he a black dot, or is he a black dot plus? Those are all different things.
So have you been in situations, I think I've asked you this before, where you've had a young man come in and you talk to him and you truly got a sense for who he was if he was dealing with some stuff? Or have they been so good at selling themselves that maybe you got it wrong just on that 30 visit or combine interview or whatever it was?
No, I mean, my number 1 story, and probably recency bias, but T'Vondre Sweat, taking him last year at 38, and he was coming off of a DWI, which he got on, I guess, what would be Sunday morning, and he was in our building for a 30 visit on Monday. And so in that visit, he was just dead set that he wanted to clear his name, that he's not a bad person, that he made a mistake. And that's what the visit was. And I had a meeting with him, probably an hour and some change, where I had to stop him. And I'm like, hey, look, man, like, I don't want to hear about the accident, whatever happened. Like, I'm trying to get to know you as the person. And we did more background research following the visit to get to know him. And I just felt so good about who he was as a person, despite what was being said, and had such a good feel for him. And then getting to know, people that surround him and how they felt about him made it an easy judgment call for me, to take him at 38 at the time. And he went on, became all rookie, and, will be a leader for that team moving forward.
Yeah, that was a home run. Because he can ball out, and we talked about him and Byron Murphy together on that defensive line, at Texas, and then that defensive line almost got upgraded to an extent as Byron Murphy sort of worked through injuries in Seattle. But you add him to Jeffrey Simmons, and sweet mercy alive, that's a real problem. And you said that he started taking his nutrition seriously, and like he was locked in through his rookie season, right?
Yeah, no, got him down to 360, and he was feeling, in his words, not mine, he was feeling sexy. And so I think you started to see an uptick in his snaps, and he was playing more. And there were moments that you could see on tape where he was waving guys off, like did not want to come out of the game. And you saw in spurts where he was just completely dominant and took over games. And I think he's only going to grow, and especially playing next to a dude like Big Jeff, those guys feed off each other. And probably one of the biggest compliments I ever got, after drafting someone, was as soon as we took Sweat and it was announced, my phone's ringing, and I'm still on the phone with Sweat and his family, and then my phone was ringing and it was Big Jeff. And after, we were doing everything, going down to talk to local media, I get on the phone, call Jeff back, and the first thing he says is thank you, because he knew he needed a big guy like that next to him. And, Jeff took him under his wing, gave him that tough love, and those 2 guys are really close.
Yeah, that was a fantastic pick and a great story to spread light on the fact that just because someone aged 21 to 22 makes a mistake doesn't mean that you have to condemn them for the rest of their lives. They can sort of be more than that. And I've told you this before, and obviously you're a little younger than me, but if they had cameras when I was growing up and I was a quote unquote good kid, Man, I'd probably still be in jail. Just just going to be honest about that. All right, let's take a quick break here. Those are our top three: Abdul Carter, Mike Green, and James Pearce Jr. tied for second. And then when we come back, we'll hit 4, 5, and 6 right after this.
One of golf's elite courses, Quail Hollow, hosts the game's top players at the PGA Championship this May on CBS.
All right, Ran, we're on to number 4. By the way, I wanted to ask you, do you have I'll tell you my comp for James Pearce Jr. You can tell me how much you hate it. What came to mind, because he's 6'5" every bit, and he's about a little under 250. I think when he played, at least he may have weighed a little bit more than that at the combine. The first player that came to mind was Randy Gregory. I think he was more complete than Randy Gregory, but in terms of the twitchiness with which he played the position.
I could see that, and I didn't even think Randy Gregory, but the first person came to mind for me was Leonard Floyd.
Okay.
And just because again, just like we talked about, with Abdul, you can move this guy around, and the University of Tennessee did. They had him standing up over the guard. They found matchups for him, and you saw at Leonard Floyd's day at Georgia, he played off the ball a pretty good bit, and they moved him around and played him on the edge some. So I see the same type of movement skills, same type of versatility in James Pearce Jr.
All right, that's a little better comp than mine, so I'll give you that one. All right, next up, Jalon Walker. He played everywhere at Georgia. He's 6'1", 243. He's listed as an edge when you sort of look at the rankings, and we have him listed as an edge here. You can do with him what you want. Any concern at 6'1", 243 about playing? His arms are 32 inches. That's plenty long, I would imagine. But if you have him playing over the tackle or as a 7 technique, any concerns about the lack of size? We've seen smaller edge rushers have a ton of success, but I just want to throw that out there.
Not for me. And I think, like you said, it's the versatility matters, with this guy. There was a point in when we were doing this exercise where I was going back and forth if I should add him to the off-ball linebacker rankings or leave him here for the edge. But I think he goes higher as an edge just because of the versatility. And I think every mock draft known to man, including ours, has him as the 8th pick to Carolina. And defensive coordinator Ezeiruaku has tons of packages, tons of different ways he could use guys. And this guy allows them to get their best 11 people on the field. And I'm sure Ezeiruaku will find a home for him in terms of what he'll play on first and second down versus in sub packages.
He feels like version 2.0 of Frankie Louvu, who's incredibly athletic, and you can line him up anywhere. And he was a big loss to that Panthers defense. He went to Washington, had a good season. But just, the next version to come out looks like Jalon Walker, because you can do with him whatever you want. And top 10 feels like a realistic possibility. There are going to be so many defensive guys that maybe he gets pushed down a little bit, but wherever he goes, it feels like he'll be an immediate impact type player. Next up, and this is an interesting prospect. He was on my list. He was not on your list as a top 5 anyway. Eventually, I'm sure he showed up. Shemar Stewart out of Texas A&M. And the issue with Shemar is not one that this ain't breaking news. We've been talking about this for much of his career. 6'5". I have him 260. He wasn't 267. He's heavier than that. He was like in the 280s, I believe. Ran a 4.59 at the combine, but the lack of production was the concern at Texas A&M. He had 1.5 sacks last year. Man, he looks the part. Like he's the first guy that's off the bus. But if you didn't see the production in college, even though he looks like this and tests like that, and there are glimpses of what he can do, what are the conversations in the draft room about that when you stack them up against these guys we've talked about already?
I tell you what, production matters to me because you have to have seen guys do it. And I know a part of this process, having sat in the big chair, is about projection. And when you have guys this freaky, this talented, and I think people don't know about this kid is he's been well coached from the womb, right? His father's a D-line coach in high school at Norland High School down in Miami. And if you go check the track record, he's turned out tons of D-line prospects to all major colleges. And so he's been taught, at home. But again, the production is what matters. A guy with this type of freaky ability, there's always one person in the building that says, "Oh, I can get him out of it. I can get the production out of him." And we've seen more often than not that hasn't happened. And so for me, I will always err on the side of the guy that I've seen produce, regardless of whatever their measurables are. But this dude is supremely talented. And that's where, for me, with a guy from his makeup, being a South Florida kid, which I am partial, to not only people from Florida, but people from South Florida in particular. But then going to Texas A&M, playing with such a great group of D-line, you would think that they would all be able to produce at some level because they're pushing plays to each other. Would have liked to see, him finish. Now, again, the sack numbers aren't there, but he was pressuring the quarterback. He was getting quarterbacks off the spot. He's, making plays all around and disruptive plays. You just would hope that a guy that you're going to take in the first round is a little bit more complete than more of a projection.
Would you take him top 32? Would he squeeze in there for you?
It depends on where I was in the top 32, because I think once you get past a certain number in this year's draft class, it's kind of a jumble in terms of talent level and what you're getting at those picks. But there is a level where you would take this guy in the top 32, because if you're looking at just the physical talent, and forget what he ran at the combine and those testing numbers, like this all shows up on the tape. You're going and you're looking at the other guys, you're like, okay, who is 4? Because again, I think not only can he play on the edge, because you mentioned at his size, I think you can reduce him inside, in some pass rush situations and get him in a 4-eye technique and have a guard have to take a wide set, and then he could use his athleticism to make inside-outside moves. But there's a level of 32 in the top 32 that I would definitely consider taking him.
And they sometimes line him up over the center on third and long situations just to get after it with this quick twitch. Excuse me. Did you, if you can remember back, I'm sure you can, Darius Robinson last year at Mizzou, similar size. If these two guys were on the board in the same draft class, would they be similarly ranked, or would you take one over the other?
Probably last year, probably take Darius over him, just because you've seen Darius produce.
Right.
And I think the big thing for Darius coming out last year, and again, it's all scheme dependent, was what's his true size, because you had seen such fluctuations in his weight and where he could play and where he could end up. I think that's, gave a lot of teams questions in terms of his fit. But if you have a defense that values versatility and being able to move guys around, not comparing him to this guy, but think about a Danico Autry, who can set physical edges on first and second down and is going to live inside rushing the passer, in sub packages. You can find and create a role for Shemar in that same vein.
Right. All right. Next up, Donovan Ezeiruaku, and Donovan was number 5 on your list. He was just outside on my list. And in part, and I was talking to you about this yesterday, he's 6'2.5", 248, 34-inch arms, which that works. And I watched his first 4 games in the fall, and then I didn't get back to him until last week. And I thought he struggled a little bit against the run early in the season. And I went back and watched him, and I thought he got better against the run as the season went on. I think he's a top 15 pass rusher in terms of how he gets after with the juice that he plays and the motor he plays and all those things. But talk to me about that, about the opportunity for someone to get better as the season goes on, number one. And even though he's quote unquote undersized compared to some other edge rushers, you can get better in certain aspects of playing football. In this case, I thought he got much better as a run defender.
Yeah. And again, the graphic that we're seeing, you see he has a harness on that right shoulder. So you don't know if that played a part in it. And sometimes these guys have to know that playing the run is a requirement. And it's an expectation. A lot of these kids, you hear them say, hey, sacks get you stacks. And so they're looking to rush the passer and get sacks and, maybe tackle the running back on their way to the quarterback. But sometimes you get them in your program, you got to let them know that setting physical edges is required in the expectation. And this guy kind of puts me in the mind of another former BC edge rusher, Harold Landry, who people see more as a pass rusher. Don't give Harold enough credit for the way he sets edges. But if you go back and you look at his TFLs over the last couple of years, you'll see he makes tons of plays in the backfield down the line with just the way he plays. And Harold, although not the biggest guy, he's probably a little smaller than Donovan, but Harold plays with leverage and knows how to stay under the pad level of the tackle and use the length that he has. And I think Donovan will learn this as a pro.
So you feel pretty comfortable with, or the defensive line coach, when you're having these conversations, that he could set the edge in the NFL against these 325-pound tackles?
Oh yeah, because again, there's a multitude of ways of setting an edge, right? So And honestly, the way these offensive coordinators call these plays now, your quote unquote edge guy isn't always the edge setter. Now they're forcing runs out to the corners and forcing the corners, to set the edge. So sometimes you won't even be put in that position, and you just got to be disruptive and know when to slip. But if a guy has shown a propensity to, at least you see it on tape that he can do it, now you just got to find a way to get it out of him consistently. And like I said before, let him know that it's an expectation and a requirement, and that you're not taking downs off.
Yeah. And I'm glad I went back and watched him, because our buddy Lee J. Duzable was talking him up, and I said, I don't know about the run. And I went back, and at the second half of the season, he got better at it. And, that's what you want to see. You want to see going in the right direction, especially if you're going to be in the top 30, top 40 conversation. That's exactly what Donovan Ezeiruaku is. All right. That's our top 5. We didn't do 10 for the edge rush like we did some of the other positions, because when we come back, we're going to talk about this linebacker class, which also has some dudes in it. And I'm excited to talk to Rand about these guys. And we'll do that right after this. All right, Rand, let's talk some linebackers, some off-ball linebackers in particular. First up, Jihaad Campbell out of the University of Alabama. Just turned 21 in February. Almost 6'3", 235, excuse me. These are our individual lists. Again, at the top, it looks pretty similar. Jihaad Campbell and Carson Schwesinger, linebacker, former walk-on, I believe, out of UCLA. And they had a deep linebacker class at the UCLA room. I had Pupal at third at Ole Miss. You had Demetrius Knight out of South Carolina. He's gotten a lot of buzz. And it's funny, you can look at 10 different lists and have 10 different names after the first 2 guys. And all these guys, I think, have an opportunity to get drafted and be contributors early on. Kobe King out of Penn State, Kalen King's brother, had a really good season. He's my number 4. And then Jamon Dumas-Johnson, the linebacker out of Kentucky, is my number 5. You have Demetrius Knight third, as I mentioned, and then Danny Stutsman out of Oklahoma, who's got a lot of buzz over the summer. Had a really good season, just sort of got lost in the mix when we talked about these linebackers. And then finally, Barrett Carter out of Clemson, another guy that I liked a lot and incredibly athletic. And I'll start here, Rand. Talk about the transformation from when you were in the league in 2003, 2004, and beyond, how these quote-unquote middle linebackers have changed body type, what they're asked to do, athleticism, because they look more like safeties now than they do like what Ray Lewis used to look like back in the day.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was going with it. You got a lot of converted safeties, playing down in the box now. I'll go old head, and say back in my day, you had to deal with the big downhill, like you said, Ray Lewis, the Keel Spikes, the Teddy Brewskis. These guys were coming downhill. It was headbanger boogie, and you were leaving out of there with a headache. I dare to say those were the days where you got your bell rung, and not necessarily a concussion, but you got your bell rung, and you knew as a running back you had to have your mouthpiece in and strap up. But again, the game's changed. The run game was featured, early back in those days. And I had the luxury to play for the Colts, and we were a team that threw the ball around the yard, and that kind of started to permeate throughout the league. And what you see now is a lot of teams that throw the ball around the yard. And so you got to have more athleticism, at that position, at the linebacker position. So you see the more slender frame, linebackers. I remember talking to my dad, who was, a 19-year running back coach in the league, played blocking fullback, in the NFL. And in his even more old head way, he says, man, I don't respect no fullback in the National Football League right now. And I'm like, and we're arguing. I'm telling him he could never be Kyle Juszczyk and do the things that he does. And he's like, yeah, but on my Giants days, the smallest linebacker on our team was 245. And he was like, so imagine 6 weeks of training camp, full pads of downhill lead blocking on Gary Reasons and Harry Carsons and Pepper Johnson and those type of guys. He was like, yeah. He was like, you earned your paycheck every day during those times.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Would you rather have to block as a running back in pass protection? Would you rather block Ray Lewis or like Patrick Queen? So, like, do you want to brute on brute strength, or do you want someone who might sort of give you a little head fake and leave you sort of blocking air?
Oh, give me Patrick Queen all day. And hey, listen, don't get it twisted. Ray had some little wiggle to him earlier on as well. But you know, with a guy like Patrick Queen, that he can bull rush you and come down the middle of you, but he doesn't want to live in that space, down in and down out. So, if a guy gives you a little head fake, a little wiggle, these quarterbacks that are behind you, they get, that's one step more that they could get the ball out. That's another hitch they could take to get the ball out. So you may not even make contact. Versus with Ray, you got to sprint to the line because you got to meet force with force, and it's a likelihood that you won't come out of that, game healthy. So give me Patrick Queen.
Yeah, man. You're grew up in a military family. My dad was in the Marines. I was not cut out to be in the military, nor was I cut out to be a blocking running back. Yeah, I have more power to you, brother.
To your point, same thing, because of my dad played fullback. My biological father played fullback, so everyone assumed that that's what my natural position was going to be because I was considered a bigger back. But like you said, wasn't cut out for the military. For my stepdad, wasn't cut out to be a downhill lead blocker. So I found my home in personnel.
Listen, man, raise your kid to be a punter. I think the holder has more pressure. Just be a punter or play golf, and that way you can get paid and not get hit. All right, let's talk about these guys. Jihaad Campbell, man, I didn't come to him until late in the season, just because he was younger, and then the more you watch, the more you like, and then you find out he's not just turned 21. The arrow, it feels like the upside on this guy, Ran, is crazy, just because 2 or 3 years from now he could be a completely different player, and by that I mean somehow more impressive. He'll get stronger. He'll probably get a little bigger if he wants to add some weight to the 235-pound frame. He may not need to. But they lined him up everywhere too. Like they would line him up off the edge. He would play in the slot. He would play off ball. I actually like him a little more than Jalen Walker, and I'm on an island on that. But both guys I would take top 15 and feel fantastic about it.
Yeah, in the words of DJ Khaled, another one. Another one out of University of Alabama.
Right.
That's fits this linebacker profile that they have. It is so funny when you turn on Alabama defensive tape and you're watching the end zone copy. All of their linebackers, if you date all the way back to D'Amico Ryans, they all look the same in terms of their body type, their structure, their length. And this guy fits that profile. Like you said, they move him around. And I think his off the ball stuff is a little more natural than Jalen's, which I think is why you like him a little bit more. And then the edge rush stuff is just another, part of his repertoire. But I think even seeing him as an edge rusher gives him even more value on third down, because now you could blitz him and create these one-on-one scenarios where a back has to block him and his pass rush. And so I really love this kid's upside. He was one that I probably got on in the middle of the fall, just buzzing through tape. And as you're watching tape of someone else and someone starts to stand out, you just like, hey, make a little notation like, hey, maybe I need to go back and watch this kid. And like you said, when you realize that he was just 20, at the time, and you're seeing the production, that the arrow's pointing up.
Yeah, he's fun, man. And I mean, perhaps there's a possibility he slipped out of the first round just because there's a run on every other position. If he goes into the second, oh my gosh, that feels like such a steal for the way that player could end up being as he gets older. Next up, Carson Schwesinger, linebacker out of UCLA, walk on. And that group, as I mentioned a moment ago, that linebacker room was so deep that Femi Oladejo moved from linebacker to edge rush, where he absolutely balled out. He embarrassed Debo, but also Cruiser Striker in Penn State. He actually called that his coming out party, what he did to that right tackle. I don't know the right tackle's name. I don't want to learn it just for fear of reprisal, but he had a tough afternoon. But my point, Carson Schwesinger was one of the reasons that allowed Femi to move outside. And we talk about this a lot, and I feel like I'm repeating myself, but this guy, like every single play, he is locked in going 100 miles an hour, typically downhill. Sometimes he's a little out of control going downhill, but I think you'd rather have that than trying to make sure he's where he needs to be and wrapping up and tackling. He does all those things. Way better athlete than I think people gave him credit for. And he was another slow burn for me. I had to watch a little bit more of him to get the true sense for who he is. And then I was talking to someone at UCLA at the combine, and they're like, yeah, man, we knew a while ago this guy was going to be one of those dudes, because I think he started on the scout team and you would see him dominate there, and then he just progressed. And now he's every bit going to be I would be shocked if he gets out of the second round.
Yeah, I mean, true run, chase, and hit guy, like you said, flies around. That's the first thing you notice on the tape when you turn it on, that he's flying around. He's playing sideline to sideline. like to see him be a little heavier, and he'll get there, in terms of the weight room and stronger and strengthening. But he flies around. He's instinctive, which is the number one key for me when I'm watching any of these guys off the ball. Can you read the triangle? Can you feel, block development, as you will? He reminded me a lot of, and I don't know, maybe it was just a number, but he reminded me a lot of Alex Singleton at Denver. Even Alex, if you look back at Alex, he started his career at Seattle, went to training camp with those guys, got released. He was on my, post training camp list, on my emergency list. Then he went up to Canada, played up there, and then came back into the league, and he's been a starter, ever since. So it's kind of similar story with the whole walk on to now you're going to be a potential draft pick. But the way those guys play football, in terms of the urgency, the toughness, allows them to overcome any type of, physical limitations that they may have. And it just shows up on tape, because, at the end of the day with him, if he's not starting for you on defense, then there's a home for him to be your core special teams guy until he grows into that role of a NFL starter.
Hey, let me ask you this, because I think it varies position by position. But he, as I'm looking at his notes here, 8-time honor roll member in college. For that position, it feels certainly more important than, a lot of times, half jokingly, you don't necessarily need your cornerbacks to be splitting the atom, but you want your quarterback to be smart. You want your safety to be smart. And it feels like you want the linebacker, as you sort of go up the spine of the defense, you want that guy to have a good head on his shoulders. And you talked about how good he is in terms of quick twitch and taking good first steps. Is that at all way into the conversations, whether these kids are good academically or not, depending on the position?
Well, again, it's not necessarily academic. It's how you process information, how you how you retain information. I won't say who. There's a player that played in the National Football League that, probably if you put tests in front of them, they would just be okay. But when it came to their football mind, they were a savant. Their brain was a computer. They could tell you plays, down distances, scenarios going back to, through the course of their career. And sometimes guys just see the X's and O's better than you see, the academic part. But you definitely want your linebacker, your middle linebacker particularly, to be smart, to be able to get you in and out of situations, because that is the quarterback of your defense. You think of Luke Kuechly. I've been there in a room where an offensive coordinator, a play caller, is saying he has to outsmart Luke Kuechly, not necessarily the defensive coordinator, because the defensive coordinator was going to make the base call. And then from there, Kuechly was taking over. And so this offensive play caller is going into it where he's saying, I have to outsmart this linebacker just because of his ability to get that defense in and out of plays. Yeah,
Luke Kuechly didn't even hide it. He had his little Harry Potter glasses. He was smart when he came out with those Harry Potter glasses. Oh man, he's gonna be a Hall of Famer. Fantastic player. All right, next up, tie for third. Chris Paul Jr. We'll start with him. Pooh Paul out of Ole Miss, transfer from Arkansas. And the thing I liked about Chris Paul, and I talked to him about this at the Shrine Bowl, all these guys are super twitched up because that's just how they play these days. But he also will take on blocks in the interior. And I appreciated that. A lot of times you see linebackers running around blocks and whatever, they all do it. But he was not afraid to take on blocks, get off blocks, and get to the ball between the tackles. So I appreciated that part about his game. I joke with him. The one sort of slip up I saw him have physically was against Lenore Sellers, the insane quarterback out of South Carolina. And a lot of these SEC guys compare him to Cam Newton. And he said, no, he got me. No doubt about it. There's nothing I can do about it. But that guy is special. But I think athletically, Chris Paul is in the same conversation as a lot of these guys we're talking about. I like him on day 2. We'll see how this shakes out. Did you get an opportunity to watch Chris?
No, I did. And, in watching him, because, again, I buzzed through him again this morning, like you can make an argument for him to be number 2 on this list. Just because of everything he shows, the violence in which he plays with. Because, like you said, one of the other key attributes outside of the instincts that you're looking for when you're looking at these linebackers is block destruction. And their ability to, stack blocks, use their hands, whether it's the 6-inch punch, stack shed, and be able to get off blocks. Because again, in this league, you're going to see teams create scenarios where they could get these guards off, on these linebackers, and you got to be able to, set blocks and condense, run zones and, and fill lanes. And you see that with him. And he's another guy, like you said, that played with his hair on fire, and he jumps off the tape when you turn on Ole Miss defense.
All right. Also tied for third, Demetrius Knight II. out of South Carolina, and I'm just looking at my notes to see why I had him ranked a little bit lower. I had him a couple spots lower than Pooh Paul, and 6'1", 246, all great. He has long arms. He's 25, and I don't know in post-COVID football if that matters so much. If you're just talking about the rookie deal anyway, which is 4 years, so he'll still be less than 30 by the time that expires, and you can decide what you want to do then. Is that an issue at all for a non-quarterback to be 25 coming into the league?
It's a little bit of issue because you got to understand, and again, it depends on where you take them. And so, you got to understand that, hey, this may be a guy that you have for 4 years, and depending on, how well he plays and what that number is going to be, at the linebacker position at the time, you have to have a plan for that, moving forward, with the understanding that come second contract, this guy is going to be 29. But one of the things I love the most about him when you're watching him is his ability to command the defense. There was no question that he was the quarterback of that defense, getting guys lined up, and that was a talented group that they had around him, in front of him, and both behind him. And I think there was no question that he was the leader of that group and how he ran things. And, I think you see the size, like you said, like you talked about. I think you see the intelligence, and I think you see the speed, particularly the short area stuff. And I think that all shows up on tape for him.
Yeah, I made a note. And against Alabama, he was shot out of a cannon. Coming downhill out of coverage to get a sack on Jalen Milroe. And that's not something you see very often. I don't care who you are. Other thing is he started at Georgia Tech, transferred to UNC Charlotte, and then played last season in South Carolina. And also he's the number 30 dual threat quarterback coming out of high school, which is interesting to give you some idea of the smarts you're talking about in terms of understanding what's going on across the entire field, in addition to the athleticism. All right. Those are our top 4. We have 2 guys tied for 5th. We'll start with producer strikers Kobe King out of Penn State. He felt to me like an old school linebacker in terms of coming downhill, but also with a little new school sideline to sideline versatility. He wasn't stiff to me. I thought he could drop into coverage. You might disagree, but he was a fun watch because they had the 2 safeties on that team, Reed and Winston Jr. Winston Jr. was hurt, but he came back from a season-ending knee injury, I think in week 1 or week 2, and ran a 4.5 a few weeks ago. And of course, we know about the other side of the ball with Drew Aller coming back and 2 running backs coming back. Of course, Abdul is their dude there. But this is another guy. They're all grouped together for me. So if you told me late day 2, early day 3, I could get on board with that. But I love the mentality that Kobe King brought to play in the middle of the linebacker position in terms of a little old school juice to what do we see these sort of new school linebackers do.
Yeah, and again, you always, because of the era in which we grew up, you always respect these guys, because of the physicality in which they play. But with that said, and talking out of both sides of my mouth, that was the one reason why I dinged him, on this list, because we talked about at the very beginning of this segment and what the game is now. And I do think that he will have his limitations in coverage when the game is spread out. And can he cover, the deep over, the special is what we called it. Can he turn, run, flatten, and take that away? And I think he will struggle with those type of things, in the league. But I think there's a home for him in the National Football League, maybe as a 4th linebacker, a guy that can play, be the Mike, and, maybe play some will on 1st and 2nd down just because of the mentality. And then he could also end up being a core special teamer just because of what we talked about, the physicality and the urgency in which he plays with.
No, that's a good point. And like Fred Warner, you have no concerns about him covering the deep over. Kobe King is a guy that short and intermediate. If the pass is in front of him, I feel okay with him coming downhill and taking pretty good angles to the ball. I don't want him turning his back. I think you feel pretty good about Jihaad Campbell turning his back on that deep over, right?
Yeah, of course. And I think all the guys that we've mentioned thus far, up until this point, they all can cover that special route, just being able to see it, turn, run, flip their hips, and run stride for stride with whatever the position is. Even if it's a receiver, if they don't necessarily have to be stride for stride, but they could be underneath it to make it an even tougher throw for the quarterback to have to squeeze it over the linebacker and under the safety.
All right, let's talk about your guy, Danny Stutsman, who you had as number 4 on your list. And again, he had a lot of buzz coming out of the summer. And I think I had him in my first round mock draft back in August, with the first one that came out of the fall. And can he cover the deep over? Let's start there.
I think he can. And you mix in his height, because the height plays a piece, in that as well. And I'll be honest, he surprised me with his 40. that he ran.
4.52 and 6'3", 233, to your point about the height.
Yeah, so I would have expected maybe in the 4.65s, and so he ran, really well. And my comp for this guy is Peyton Wilson. I do think Peyton is a looser athlete.
Yeah.
But if you go back and you look at their height, their weight, their 10-yard split, and their verticals, all the exact same. And so I think, but again, Peyton goes higher in last year's draft or any draft if it weren't for the injuries. And we saw when he got in that Pittsburgh system under Mike Tomlin, under Terrell Austin, and he became a player for them and made plays. And I think Danny calms things down. And the one thing that Danny doesn't get credit for is his ability to take things away in coverage. He's instinctive. He's very smart. And you feel him in coverage, not necessarily matching up and, mirror matching routes. But if he feels things in zones, he's taking routes away, whether that's just stepping over and covering up a tight end or a running back underneath, which forces the quarterback to, pat the ball one more time or take one more hitch, which allows the rush one more step to get there.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I'm looking at my notes here. A smart player consistently reads keys in run game and understands route concepts and zone drops. This is exactly what you just said there. And the picture that Stryker just showed, and you talked about this earlier with another player, but he did have an arm brace on, and I wonder if that affected him. I haven't talked to anyone to ask about his injury history last fall, but sometimes you watch a guy and maybe he's not having the game that you thought he was going to have, and he might be banged up. And those are questions that obviously you find out when you do the medicals as an NFL team. But I liked him a lot, and I have them graded. Like, I have these guys so closely graded together that if you took one over the other, especially in the list we're talking about here, I'm not going to be mad about it. Barrett Carter was the guy that you had on the list, and I had Jamon Dumas Johnson out of Kentucky on my list as well. But those are our top fives, and I think that's it. Anything else we want to talk about, Strikers? Did we hit all the points?
Unless you guys just want to chat it up for a bit, we're all good.
Talk more about Florida. Yeah, I got to talk more about the Gators. I don't know anything. I haven't watched college basketball forever. Are they going to be okay next year, or we're just enjoying this year?
Well, we got to enjoy this year first and foremost for what it is, because it's just going to be hard to replace a player like Walter Clayton Jr. He was such a key piece. I think he set the record for like most points in the tournament. He had I think he had back-to-back 30-point games to get them, to the finals. And then for a guy who was the leading scorer, first-team All-American, all those accolades, he starts the game over. And I don't think he scored in the first half, but he had 7 assists, to keep spreading the ball around. And then in the second half is when he got going. He just has that ability to take over a game. And the best thing I love, and you see the kids, they do it all the time. I got ice in my veins. Like, he's like this the entire time. He's never here. He's never there. He's like this the entire time. The only time you ever saw emotion out of him was when the clock hit 0 and he was celebrating. But one of the things that he doesn't get credit for, because you see the scoring, his ability to take over the game that way, but he made some key defensive plays throughout this tournament that helped us, including, the closeout on that final play of the game, which forced the guy to not even attempt the shot, but to allow it to hit the ground that potentially, where we called it back a day, or up and down, or travel, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But that was due to his ability to see that, feel it, and just run out and close out. He also had a block earlier in the game, deflecting a jumper. So, we're going to ride this one out. You told me I get a week to celebrate. So I will celebrate. I'm the only person driving around where I live with a Gator, not the only person, but I have a Gator tag on my car, on my license plate. My wife does as well. I got a Gator head on my garage. I got a Gator statue on my front door. So it's no secret who our affiliations to.
Yeah, you're all in. I'll give you credit for that. So did you watch every tournament game, or you just watched the finals and was celebrating?
No, I watched every tournament game.
Okay.
Watched every tournament game just to get a feel for the team. And I think, because it's not just us, but I think we're seeing something that we're not quite recognizing yet. I think we're seeing a return of the big, because those teams throughout the tournament, and I don't think it's a coincidence that all 4 number 1 seeds made it to the Final Four. because they all have bigs and guys that play big and played the game in which you still emphasize using the big and being able to create shots for the big. And so I think we're probably seeing a reemergence of the big, because I think guys will those big guys, those 7-footers and 6'11" guys will start getting recruited, more and playing more on the low block.
And that's when I sort of tuned out of college basketball. Bigs were incredibly important. I'm glad I'm taking a break, because I know the Tar Heels have hit a rough patch. So they've hired a GM. Hopefully they can get back on the right path. And I'll just ask you this before we go, Ran. Any hope for Strikers Penn State basketball team? Because from what I understand, they're terrible.
Yeah, they don't register on my radar. That's when you take the kids outside and you throw 1v1s in the backyard.
Watch out. We're coming for the crown title. That's us next year. NIT, no more. We're going for the crown.
You got to know your place, and NIT is where you guys should start. Have they ever been good, Striker?
And they had the 1 year, a couple of years ago, where they made the tournament, won one game. Before that, I think it was back like early 2000s when they were, but short answer, no.
All right. Well, we'll put all our eggs in the Drew Aller basket and hope for the best for the football team. How about that? All right. That's it. That's a wrap on episode 242. Thanks to my guy, Ran. Thanks to Striker for producing. Thanks to all you guys who watch, listen, and comment. Chomp, chomp. We'll see you guys in the next one.